Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk about turning your ideas and your vision into art. And I'm going to be drawing this. I love David Lynch's Dune. To this day, it remains one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's controversial. I get the critiques. I can see its flaws. I mean, to be fair, I fell in love with it watching the 4-hour version. They used to play it like on television. They played over the course of 2 nights, 2 hours one night, 2 hours the other night, which I think is the better version. The cinema version, the one they showed in theaters, the shorter version, I don't think is as good. But you know, even then, the longer version does have its flaws, but I still love it. There's something about just the whole tone of it, the feel of it, the visuals, the inventiveness of it that just totally mesmerizes me. It's still just completely different from any other sci-fi movie you've ever seen. And it is important enough to me and essential enough to me that I have an almost impossible time visualizing it in any other way than the David Lynch interpretation. Like the idea of a still suit looking any different than it does in that movie, it's hard for me to comprehend. I just feel like it just perfectly captures the tone of the book. I love the casting, and despite all the flaws, I love it. I think probably one of the best things I could say about it is it's just one of the few films where I get chills when I'm watching it. And for me, that is one of the defining qualities of a really great movie. So with that in mind, I just watched Jodorowsky's Dune the other day, which for those of you that don't know, it's this documentary about Alejandro Jodorowsky, who is really almost like this analog to David Lynch, kind of quirky, idiosyncratic, bizarre, surreal. But the documentary talks about Jodorowsky's attempt to make Dune years before David Lynch came along. I mean, this was even before Star Wars. It's a stunning, inspiring film. The things that he was trying to do with his team, his unwillingness to compromise his vision in any way, it's just all like stunning. You know, if Lynch's Dune was audacious, this thing was on a whole different tier with its audacity, just startling, enormous, this totally uncompromising vision. I mean, they honestly, without any irony, set out to change the world with this movie. Of course, he never got his version of Dune made. It may have something to do with the fact that it would have been like 12 hours long if they would have followed the script that they wrote. But there's lots of reasons why. It would have been insanely expensive. And, you know, they kind of suggest that this project had lots of ripples throughout the movie world, that it went, you know, made its rounds through all the studios and influenced other creators, you know, including even like Star Wars. And, you know, this art team he assembled, which was like Moebius, H.R. Geiger, among others. I mean, they went on to make all of these like legendary films and have this big influence on Hollywood sci-fi. And so I actually really like this movie. If anything, I think it's kind of this masterclass on how to fail. I would put it like right beside Inside Llewyn Davis in this like how to fail honorably section of my library, which is really a topic I'd love to talk about on its own one of these days. But for all the amazing talent and all the audacious, absurd, and avant-garde plans, at the end of the day, David Lynch's Dune is the Dune that happened. And I'm a little bit torn about making this comment, but I think I stand by it that in that regard, Lynch's Dune is the Dune that inspires me more. And this brings me to the point I really wanted to get to. You've probably heard the phrase, everyone has ideas. The idea being that ideas are not what makes art. It's having the ability to actually go out and make the art. Personally, I would qualify that statement. Some people have shitty, horrible ideas, and some people have amazing ideas. But even amazing ideas aren't worth much if you don't or if you can't do something with them. And more importantly, it's important to distinguish between ideas/vision and art. Vision can be a powerful thing, but it's important to know that vision is not art. And that's because creating real art takes work, and the work is what makes art special. So there's this concept that exists across all mythologies and all traditions, and that is the idea of the sacredness of mountains, which is funny that we're talking about Jodorowsky since he has this, one of his movies is called Holy Mountain, which I just got from the library, so I need to check it out. I hear it's really surreal and bizarre. So, and if you come from a Judeo-Christian background like myself, this concept is a little more obvious. And the idea here is that the tops of mountains are the place where heaven and earth intersect. It's basically the place where earth reaches up and touches the heavens, and it creates this space, this intersection that's not quite heaven and not quite earth, but it's this middle ground where heaven and earth can communicate and where heavenly things can be converted to earthly things and earthly things can ascend into heaven. You know, think about Moses on Mount Sinai, or, you know, the Mount of Transfiguration, or like the Greek gods on Mount Olympus. And you'll even find that within many traditions, the holy spaces, the temples and the shrines are found on literal mountaintops or are like representative of mountains. There's like a way that they are built and constructed, and they have the symbols of mountains within them as well. So this is the essential metaphor for understanding imagination and reality. Imagination is the realm of the abstract. It's the realm of the spiritual. It's heaven. Reality is the earth around us. It's our daily lives. It's the stuff we all have to do to survive and get by. The place where reality and imagination intersect is art. It's the place where we take imagination and will it into our own world. And when it's done right, it carries with it an ephemeral power that can only come from bridging this weird gap between the spiritual and the physical. And bringing the spiritual into the physical realm has always been fraught with perils. You're giving birth to something new, and people are not always totally happy with that. I mean, there's a reason why there have been so many martyrs in this world. On the other side of the spectrum, there's also no shortage of bad guys that have no qualms about taking a popular message and using it for their own purposes. So on one side of things, you get ridiculed and reviled for daring to challenge the status quo. And on the other extreme, your beautiful, courageous, dangerous message gets snatched up by powerful forces and gets used to do all sorts of awful things. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as the perils of art are concerned. I mean, there is like selling out yourself to make money. There is also this idea of getting caught in the myth of treating the abstract and the metaphorical as if it's real. So there's a lot of perils when we're talking about this kind of intersection between imagination and reality. So it's no surprise that many people out there are okay sticking with just ideas and daydreams or entertaining themselves with the creation of others. You can get the comfort of dreaming, but you don't have to deal with the real world messiness of trying to give birth. I've only watched, but I can tell you from experience that giving birth is really messy and painful. So my wife could testify to that better than I could, but from where I was standing, it was very messy and it sounded painful. But learning to create and getting comfortable with it can be a harrowing skill to master. There are so many people that find it almost impossible to open what seems like this massive, immovable, just like welded shut iron door between imagination and reality. I talk about some of those reasons in The Emotional Battle of Art, which I'll link to here. But suffice it to say, it's no small feat, or at least that's how it feels. But here's the thing. There's a certain type of magic to making art. If you can make your way to the top of the mountain once, the next time will be easier. If you can just wedge open that iron door a little bit, it'll never shut quite as tightly again. So try and find a way to make it up that mountain. Try to find a way to pry that door open. If I were you, I'd start small. If I were you, I would try to find companions to take that journey with you. I mean, of course, those last 100 yards, you're always going to have to walk on your own. That's just part of like making art, is you have to suffer some of it alone. But it's worthwhile to find people to walk the path with you. You may have heard the old saying about like a camel sticking his nose under the tent, and how if you let the camel do that, little by little, it'll make its way inside the tent. And usually that story is as a warning about making small compromises that can turn into big disasters. But in this case, I want to use the camel as a metaphor for you. You want to get into that tent, and you got to start by sticking your nose in. So what is the smallest thing you can do that would give you victory, where you can take one little piece of your imagination and bring it into reality? You know, put aside your epic graphic novel or your, 3-movie trilogy screenplay you're writing, and start with a little project where you can try things out and where you can demonstrate what you're made of. If you can just get your nose under that tent, or you can get up to the mountain, or if you can just wedge that door open a little, and geez, I'm using way too many metaphors here, but the important thing is to start bridging that gap between imagination and reality. And to do that, you have to start small. And once you commit, you have to be ready for the messiness. Reality does not like imagination mucking things up, and it'll push back. Sometimes it'll push back really hard. This is what Steven Pressfield calls resistance. And rather than go into a bunch of detail, I'll just tell you to go read The War of Art. Essential reading if you want to make art. But it's also important to note that art is a compromise between reality and vision. Dreams and visions are the beginning, but it's a mistake to think that the art you create is somehow going to be a carbon copy of your imagination. Art is not vision. Vision is not art. Vision may be what initiates the process, but a great artist isn't someone with a great vision. It's someone who can use that vision to produce a great piece of art. And for me, that is what is exciting about creating art. Once you sit down and get into the nitty-gritty and figure out the details, you start creating this thing that is kind of like the vision you had, but it's better. You're giving life to the vision. You're putting blood into the veins and into the body, and it becomes real, living, concrete. It becomes its own thing. And that thing is going to be more vivid, more vital, and more satisfying, and also probably more problematic than anything you could dream up in your mind. Making art, for me, is magic. But like all real magic, there's a price to pay. And that price you pay is the work it takes to make it a reality. And maybe you're going to fail. You can fail like Jodorowsky, and you can fail beautifully, or maybe you'll succeed and give birth to something new. It doesn't need to be a magnum opus. It doesn't need to be a masterpiece. It just needs to be from the heart, honest, and fearless. Do that, and you'll have bridged the gap between heaven and earth. So what do you think? Am I being unfair by valuing Lynch's Dune over Jodorowsky's? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.